one thing you might notice with these quality settings is that things can still look pixelated. So I do like to use a system called BPR, and I'll just briefly talk about what that is. There is a BPR button. This is in my custom interface. It's in the upper right corner. I believe if you go back to the standard interface, it's in the same location. So it shouldn't make a difference there. So when you hit BPR, what it does is it kind of calculates a bit of lighting, right? You see a bit of light, shadow. Also, the pixels are rendered a little bit more crisply and accurately. I don't want to get too much into lighting. I did show the other classes, but I think it's more about just getting a good basic turntable done with sharper or smoother, cleaner looking pixels. So the render settings for that, by the way, are in renderer and then under render properties. So if you don't want to have any shadows, sort of keep it as is, but with just smoother pixel handling, you can turn off shadows. Okay. The options I like to turn on are depth Q, soft Z, and soft RGB. Depth Q is basically like an automatic, very subtle depth of field. Soft Z and soft RGB, they basically look at any jagged pixels that typically happen on the border edges of your object, and they soften them out and smooth them out. So it actually winds up looking a bit more real, a bit more just very slightly soft focus and photographic, so more appealing in the end. Sometimes I do this. I usually do this for objects, but I find with characters it isn't always appealing. You can also go to preview ambient occlusion. So yeah, for some reason I'm not seeing it at all. But that may be an option you want to turn on. Something else I sometimes turn on, and this again depends on the quality of the mesh or whatever. There's something called preview wax, and I'll show you where that is. It's up here, wax preview. If you turn this on, and I'll just do this maybe on the character face here. So if you go into material, I think I'm on skin shade 4 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, skin shade 4. In material, you can go into something called wax modifiers, and if you crank this up, again, I'm not quite seeing it in the viewport. Typically I would, but when you hit render, you'll actually get something that looks a bit like soft surface scattering, right? So it gives things like a bit more lifelike, fleshy-like appearance. You know, in this case, it might be a bit much just because I'm using the same material on every object. So, you know, it's something I don't always turn on, but anyways, it's can add a lot of appeal depending on what you're doing. Okay. So if I zoom out here, I'll start again with the full frame. I typically like to start from a side view more than a front view, just because it's easier to pause the video kind of midway or quarter way through or quarter from the end and pause it to see the front view. So yeah, when I hit BPR, the render is really, really fast. Remember, like I said, if you have a previous rendering, you want to go in and delete that. Okay. I'm using the exact same settings as before, and then I'll hit turntable, and it will take typically a little bit longer per frame. So BPR is a higher quality calculation, so it does take a bit longer. So I'm going to just pause the recording. Okay, so quality-wise, it's definitely a fair bit better than the standard renderer. I do think it's just a little more professional looking. Last thing I sort of didn't talk about, just to mention, under the render again, under shadows, if you do decide to keep shadows, what I like to do with the shadows, my preferred settings for this are under BPR shadows. So you enable shadows up here, and then I typically set my global strength to 50%, and then I'll blur this between 6 and 8 pixels. And I'll show you the difference here. So I'll just with a close-up of the face. So if I'll just turn off shadows and do a BPR, just one frame render so you can see, right? Quality-wise, it looks a lot crisper, cleaner, sharper. And then if we go back and turn on shadows, right, and then hit BPR, you get these very nice, soft, gradient-like shadows that are very appealing, I would say, to the eye. So that can help enhance your render a little bit. The lighting system, just again, I don't want to get too deep into it, but if you go into light, you can actually have this kind of dramatic three-quarter kind of key light by just clicking and dragging this dot over to the left or to the right, whatever your preference is. And you can add additional lights, but again, I don't want to get into that for this demo, but I'll hit BPR again, and you'll see a little bit more dramatic lighting in the scene, right?